Good morning and welcome to the programme. We hope you're having a nice Tuesday morning. A lot in the local papers today. Go and buy and support local journalism. The Waterford News and Star out today. The Munster Express. Dungarvan Leader and Dungarvan Observer's out tomorrow. Also the free sheets, Waterford Today, Waterford Mail. Make sure to support local journalism in all its different aspects. Martin Flavin has texted me, and Damien, can you please say congratulations to Gillian Flavin and Sean Quinn on the birth of their two twin boys, Tig and Tiernan. Great name. Two great names. On Monday last. Much appreciated. And from everybody that knows Gillian and Sean, congratulations Gillian. Two twin boys born on Monday, and hope you are well and hope you have long and life and happiness together. We are going to be talking to Marc O Cathasaigh from the Greens. We're also going to be talking to Bernadette Philips, independent candidate. We are starting our series, and we've done a number of interviews already, and we're going to be continuing those interviews, and we're calling it 12 with Tiernan. So we're going to have 12 minutes, quick fire questions on the main policies and the main issues affecting the independent candidates, the party candidates, as we go along during this election in Waterford City and County. As I said earlier in the week, we're also going to have interviews regarding a quick snippet on Wexford and in Kilkenny and in Tipperary in terms of giving an overview. We will also have an in-depth analysis about the voting patterns, and if you're a first-time voter, how does it matter if you vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or does it matter whatsoever? Firstly, we're going to go straight to an interview I did last night in the Parlour Vintage Tea Rooms, lovely place in the town, and it is an interview with Eamon Ryan. Eamon Ryan is the Green Party leader, and he was in town to help launch Marc O Cathasaigh's campaign. So here's the interview with Eamon Ryan, leader of the Green Party. Eamon Ryan, good evening.
Good evening. Damien, how are you?
Good. How'd you get here?
I got a lift, and I'm on the trail. I started off in Maynooth this morning with our candidate there, Vincent P. Martin, and then I was in Kilkenny for the afternoon, and now here tonight and tomorrow morning in Waterford with Marc. So it was kind of one of those, actually, a day you'd love on the campaign trail because you're out meeting people. It kind of gives you energy, and in all three, I think we've got a chance. So.
Is this your only time going to be in Waterford?
Yeah, probably, unless there's some other kind of I'm in Westmeath on Wednesday. I'm in Kerry on Friday. I'm kind of all over the country, as all of the party leaders are, I think.
The big thing that's going to come up in the next week potentially is your costings.
Yeah.
I've gone through your policy documents, gone through your manifesto from the local elections, European elections. How much can you give as a ballpark figure are your proposals going to cost?
It's a huge cost because we're changing everything. We're changing the entire transport system, energy system, food system over 2 or 3 decades. So it's not a short-term thing. It's a 2 or 3 decade project. But it's also a huge opportunity. People always look at it as the kind of on the cost side, but actually it's where the new economy is going. The European Commission last week launched their European Green Deal, and they see it as a €1 trillion project, just how it works from Europe. We have huge opportunities to tap into that. In energy, it would be a saving because we're currently importing €6 billion a year in fossil fuels. As we switch away from fossil fuels, which we have to do, that's a €6 billion saving. And it's a massive opportunity to tap into the comparative advantage we have, particularly in wind power, particularly in offshore wind. In transport, we're saying, let's switch the budget. Let's switch from most of the budget now going on new roads to new public transport, walking and cycling. So it's not an additional cost, it's spending it differently. Thirdly, if I can, just the big ones. In terms of agriculture, the big shift is going to come through reform of the Common Agricultural Policy. That's coming anyway, and we should, rather than resisting it and fighting it, should be ahead of the game and make sure that we pay farmers properly for looking after our land, providing high quality food.
Okay. In the course of an election, we talk about the course of a government. We talk about 5 years.
Yeah.
I know you are talking bigger, you're talking wider.
Yeah.
In terms of specifics, in terms of net cost for the proposals that you're putting on the table now, what is your net cost for what you are proposing in the lifetime of this government?
Have you I actually think it's a net saving.
Have you costed it? So it's a net saving.
We've spent the last 2 years in the Joint Oireachtas Climate Committee, and we've worked out there that actually, and it is a 10-year project. A lot of the stuff you can't do in 5.
Okay.
So we're saying we switch to 70% renewable energy by 2030. All the parties have agreed on that.
And that switch is going to cost money, though.
Yes, but it's also going to save us money because we will...
In the longer term, yeah.
Well, no, in the short term too. Because we will... if we can bring that fossil fuel import bill from 6 billion a year down to 3 billion a year, that saves us. That's a net saving. That's money staying in the economy.
So anybody who's listening to this that's dubious on the costings for Green Party policies, what can you tell them in the lifetime of the next 5 years? We're not going to get into the details of fossil fuels and fossil taxes and carbon taxes and all that, because we know your policies and that. What can you tell them in terms of the broad picture? You've said it's going to be a net saving. Is it going to cost anything?
There's certain, I said there's a big cost, because there is a cost in terms, as we retrofit our homes. That's the second big project. And it isn't, it will cost 30,000, 40,000 euros a house to deep retrofit homes. But again, that can be done in a way where we get lending, including from the European Investment Bank, that covers the first quarter risk of a loan and brings down the interest cost of the overall loan. And the plan is there that the savings you make in your annual energy bill pay for the interest of the loan, covers the loan. Now, the average person is probably, if you have an oil boiler or a gas-fired boiler, we're probably spending about 2,000 a year in heating the house. If you make the house really efficient by investing that money in insulation and in solar panels on the roof and a heat pump, you'll probably bring the energy cost down to 400, 500, 600 euros. So you have a saving of 1,500 euros a year, which covers the cost of the loan.
And in terms of the overall government Department of Finance, are you able to go in and say to Pascal Donoghue or whoever it may, Michael McGrath, whoever you're going to be in government with, to say, this is how much it's going to cost for the next budget, this is how much money we want?
Yeah, we did that. And
what is
in
it?
our budget submission, we said next year there would be a 1.5 billion investment in climate. In these measures, switching to public transport.
Which would give you a return in time.
Which gives you the opportunity to save in other ways. And just the other thing on this, on the cost side, we always fixate on the 8 billion euros that we're spending each year in the public capital budget. There's a 100 billion euro private capital budget spent every year. And I think it's reallocating that money is one of the key things that the next government has to do. Included in that, I met Robert Cass earlier on last week, and he was making the case to me across the North Shore here, the other side, the development the other side. He's saying to me that they can actually do this. They can build and do it in the energy-saving way that actually makes a real reduction. We currently, at the moment in this country, we have 125 cranes up in Dublin. We've 17 in Cork, we've 2 in Galway, we've none in Limerick, and we've none in Waterford. And so when the government is we can all promise this, that, and the other from the public budget, but what I'm interested in is switching that private capital budget as well to invest in the transition we need to make. And the interesting thing is, the finance community is starting to wake up and realise that that's what they're going to have to do. I don't know if you've seen these AIB ads, they're going green.
Seen them, yeah.
That will mean that they'll be investing in the type of investments we need to make our climate transition. That's where the economy's going. BlackRock Investments, the biggest investment company in the world last week, $7 trillion.
Yeah.
They said they're going in this direction. So it's not just the public capital budget, it's the entire private capital budget we need to change as well. And for Waterford, that means investing in the likes of the North Shore project. That means investing North Keys project, investing in the public transport connections to Waterford and from Waterford to different parts of the country.
Okay, I know we don't have too much time. I appreciate you talking to me this evening. A few very specific questions, okay? Fishing. In terms of trawling, you don't want to see any more deep-sea trawling. How deep is deep?
We would like to set out large, huge, 50% of our waters into marine protected areas. In doing that, we can restore the stocks that give a long-term future for Irish fisheries. Going down the route where you just catch every fish and then there's nothing left to catch, which is what's been happening in the last 40, 50 years.
No, there's still stocks there. No, the European Common Fisheries Policy, and I know a fair bit about this, and I know you do as well, but how deep is deep? How deep do you want trawling? Like in terms of 30 metres, are we talking 50 metres, are we talking 100 metres?
The science of those marine protected areas has to be done by the Marine Institute. It's not a political wand you wave and saying, you have to do it on the basis of science. Where's the best places to protect?
But you have it in your policy that you want to ban deep sea trawling. Have you got a specific depth?
I don't have the depth. You'll have to talk to Grace Sullivan to get the figure on that.
A lot of fishing communities, people in fishing communities, might be worried about that. That you're going to decimate fishing communities.
The exact opposite. I think what's decimating Irish fishing industry is that if we've huge amount of large international trawlers hoovering up all our stocks, I think by introducing marine protected areas, you actually restore what's a really valuable asset. We have one of the most incredible fishing grounds in the world, breeding grounds, particularly off the southwest and south coast of Ireland. By actually restricting fishing, and this has to be done at
Would you restrict foreign boats?
Yes, it has to be done at a European level. This is something that we're working in coalition with our Green Party colleagues in Europe. We have the very real possibility that the Greens will be in government in Germany next year.
Yes.
You cannot do this where we tell the rest of the European Union, sorry, you're all out of here. It has to be done as part of that bigger conservation project. And I think that's what the Greens bring. It's the likes of Grace in Europe, being able to work with our European colleagues. We're in government in Austria, we're in government in Finland.
Okay.
And we've potentially been government in Germany to make that a viable option. And in the long run then, that supports smaller Irish inshore fisheries who will benefit from the stocks not being depleted.
You're talking about land preservation, you're talking about maybe more special areas of conservation in land. Does that mean, for example, the Comoros? Have you designated or have you thought about any specific areas that you want to extend special areas of designation?
We need a national land use plan. The Climate Commission was on last year, as I said, has done a lot of work on this, and we recommended that you have to have a land use plan for the whole country, looking at what areas. The 20% of our land is peatland. That peatland has to be restored and re-wetted. It's a massive project. It's going to take a huge amount of labour, a huge amount of resources. I believe we're heading towards a 30% forestation in our country. It'll take 50 years, but that's a long-term project that we need to start now.
So you haven't designated places yet?
Not specifically. That has to be done as part of a land use plan that Coillte, Bord na Móna, EPA and National Parks Wildlife Service and Teagasc have to do. You don't do it, and it's not telling any individual farmer, you do this, you do that, but it is designating how we manage and use our land, and that helps with flood prevention, it helps improve water quality, it helps store carbon, and in the end it gets you a better form of farming because you're doing the right type of farming in the right place and getting well paid for it.
In your local election manifesto and your European manifesto, you talk about supporting labour rights and collective bargaining. Will you force companies to recognise trade union collective bargaining?
I don't know. I met with Patricia King from Head of Victor recently. I think they're not looking necessarily for forced collective bargaining, but they are looking for recognition of trade unions, and we agree and support that, and we'll look to introduce that.
Everybody's entitled to be a member of a trade union.
Yes.
Collective bargaining, though, is another issue that a lot of companies don't necessarily agree with. They'll allow for certain representations, but in terms of a union representing and collective bargaining structure, what's your view on that?
My recollection talking to Patricia King is she recognised that it's the recognition first and foremost and the ability to negotiate, but you can't force the party on the other side into collective bargaining position.
And your view is it does you?
Be similar to it, yes. Similar
to it. Where are you on racism? Do you know how many times racism is mentioned in your manifesto, your European election manifesto or your webpage?
It's mentioned a lot because we have members...
Mentioned once.
Yeah.
You type in the word racism into your page.
European Election Manifesto.
No, into your webpage, right? The Green Party. All the society, energy, type it in once. July 2016, a statement regarding an investigation by the European Parliament into Ireland's xenophobia laws from 1989. That's the only mention. There's been nothing done since. There's nothing in your policies about combating racism. Why not? Why have you not done anything? Why have you not taken any action regarding racism, fighting racism?
Joe O'Brien was the third TD elected. His first day in the Dáil, he went in and did leader's question with the Taoiseach, and that was the issue he raised in terms of how we were welcoming people to this country. Yeah. My colleague Hazel Chu was elected in my own constituency, has been centre stage in that whole row for the last 6 months since she's been elected.
There's no policies on it.
Our party has been consistently right the way from the start in terms of how being welcoming to refugees. been constantly asking questions as to how we encourage, and the Department of Justice and others, to actually how you deal with those who are here in direct provision and in other difficult circumstances. So it's actually by doing. It's in the actual day-to-day actions.
I know, but should you not have certain policies on it as well? Should it not be part of your policy documents?
Well, I think you could put in, we're against racism, but that, I think, should...
Well, in terms of actions, in terms of stuff that you would do, for example, you talk about different actions in lots of different aspects of society, and you do talk about, the start of your manifesto, that there is a growing extreme right-wing tendency across Europe. Yeah. So in terms of specifically counteracting that, I don't see any policies in Green Party documentation.
I think the key policies have been around the issue of how we manage refugees and asylum seekers and direct provision. And I think that's the most immediate and direct area.
And with that, would you put a cap or a limit on the amount of refugees that come into the country?
There is going to be you can't just completely throw open the doors, because you have to manage this and make sure that you maintain public support and so on. But are we anywhere near that? I don't think we are. I think... and even in the refugees that we have committed to take in under the European and UN program refugees from Syria and from the immediate recent conflicts in North Africa, we've only still brought in half the numbers we've committed to. So my work on the Dáil in the last 3 years have been consistently asking both Charlie Flanagan and before that Francis Fitzgerald, why haven't you taken more and why is it so slow?
Why is it so slow? That was the interview with Green Party TD and leader of the Green Party, Eamon Ryan. Marc O Cathasaigh, good morning.
Good morning.
Marc, we are going to be doing a Tiernan with 12 with you in a few minutes. Is that okay?
That's okay with me.
The 12 secrets of the Green Party. Now, you're listening to Deise. Today we have an interview with Marc O Cathasaigh, who is the Green Party candidate in Waterford. Firstly, before I go to Marc, a number of your text just in. The Green Party will cripple us with tax. Get that crackpot Eamon Ryan off the radio. I'm 70 years old, no public transport, 5 miles from the nearest shop. He wants me to cycle or walk to it. Is this a joke? It's not easy to listen to this. Big congratulations to Sean and Gillian on the birth of their twins from Auntie Anne and family. I love local radio. This is great. There's a Yorkshire Terrier on his own at the end of Claremont. Anybody lost their Yorkshire Terrier? I wonder, is he voting Green, or where is he going this time? Damien, just listen to the Green Party there. I have to give a response. Let's get one thing straight. The Irish fishing industry has been decimated by the French and Spanish industry and rules from Europe. It all sounds happy clappy, but it is really, really difficult. Secondly, with regard to people retrofitting their homes, I can't afford to get a loan to deep retrofit my home. I'm self-employed, barely making ends meet. I'm sorry to be so negative, but it's people like me who are not receiving social welfare, who are working in the public service. This plan of the Greens is off the wall. Thanks, that's in from Jim. Jim would be called, I suppose, Marc, the squeezed middle. There's a man who's not on social welfare, who's in that position that he's working, he wants to work, he can't retrofit his home.
Absolutely.
I'll come to you in a second, OK?
Sure.
Damien, deep sea fishing is 500 miles offshore off the Atlantic shelf. Mr Ryan can't legislate for international waters. What he would want to be legislating for is the super trawlers that operate inside Irish waters and do all the fishermen here out of a job. As a super trawlers, that are the problems. Damien, the Greens want to stop the live exports of livestock. That's the only way we can get a decent price for our beef, to stop live imports. Damien, the Greens are getting away lightly. What about their role in the crash, says John. Damien, unreal. We can't get homes for people and our health services on our knees. He's talking about getting us all into buses and stuff like that. The Greens have their heads in the clouds. The Greens are on about public transport. They're not living in the real world. How can you do that in rural Ireland? Plus, the last time we had the Greens, they taxed us to the hilt. That's from John in Portlaw. Some of your texts and comments, 083 3333 975. You can call 051 846 123. Tony phoned in and said in the city, no one in their right mind would be voting for the Greens because of the carbon taxes that are going to come on. Another caller says there's only one issue, that's the hospital. Nothing else matters in comparison. Starting the stopwatch. Marc O Cathasaigh, why should people vote Green?
People should vote Green, Damien, because it's undeniable at this stage that action is needed. So I'm 43 years on this earth, and even in that short time frame, I've felt the difference in terms of how our climate is behaving. It's absolutely horrendous to see what's happening in Australia at the moment, and we know that that's now the new normal for Australia. Those bushfires are still raging. So We know that there's a huge job of work that needs to be done in terms of the changes that need to be made. And they're going to be doing regardless of whether the Greens are in government or not. But there's a huge job of work in front of us in terms of making that transition to a low-carbon economy. Now, why we should vote for the Greens is that we want to do that in a socially progressive way. It's going to have a cost for sure, and we need to structure that cost to make sure that we're bringing the people who can least afford it, that we're bringing them with us.
How much is it going to cost? How much are you going to pay? How much are the taxpayers? How much is this green thing going to cost in the lifetime of 5 years in the government? Is it $1.5 billion a year? Are we looking at 7-8 billion?
So the costed budget that we put in this year, as Eamon said, it's $1.5 billion that was put in as the cost. But what we have to factor into this as well is that at the other side of the coin is the cost of inaction. And the cost of climate inaction is going to be massive. Now, even just in terms of brass tacks, we're talking about $1.5 billion investment, and $1.5 billion investment that's going to benefit people. There's €600 million of fines each year that Ireland is liable for because we haven't reduced our emissions. And for €600 million of fines, we get precisely nothing. If we make that level of investment in deep retrofitting of homes, we get warmer, healthier homes, we reduce our fossil fuel bills, ultimately we make savings for people involved in it. Again, if we work on urban renewal, we get the returns. If we work on public transport, we get the returns. There's $600 million a year that's going to be siphoned out of the exchequer with nothing to show for it.
Those returns will come in time. As I said to your party leader last night, how much are you going to increase taxes on people to get this $1.5 billion a year, to get this $7.5 billion, $8 billion over 5 years?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there has to be carbon pricing. So I suppose one of the things that when I'm talking to people, there's no doubt that carbon has a cost. At the moment, as I said, it's been levied in fines. It's
so how much are you going
to in terms of society?
How much will carbon tax go up?
Well, Fine Gael have laid out a time frame for getting it to €80 a tonne, which is stiff. And if we're moving towards that €80 a tonne, we need to make sure that it's done in such a way that the people who can least afford it are not footing the bill. The other thing that we need to do if we're levying carbon tax, by the way, and so
do you want to increase that by more or less, or what do you say?
No, €80 a tonne was what was
okay, so you'll
suggested.
Stick with that.
Yes, and it has to be. People have to be timetabled for it. But something that's very important with carbon tax, and what Fine Gael are doing with carbon tax currently, is they're just putting it in with the rest of taxation. And if you build that into the general taxation model, then there's no incentive for the government to reduce it. They'll build it into day-to-day spending. It'll be spent. It'll be gone. We're looking for a carbon cashback or a fee and dividend model. So that's so the carbon tax is paid in to a pot and then is split back out evenly. We've had this road tested with the ESRI. They said it's progressive. People who are the poorest use the least carbon and they would stand to actually benefit. And this would help people fund those retrofits that you're talking about.
My understanding, though, that an increase in the carbon tax alone will not get you that $1.5 billion that you're looking for every year. Where else are you going to increase taxes?
Well, I suppose where we are currently as a party that's outside of government, we don't have access to those organs of state that somebody sitting in the Department of Public Expenditure would be. So
you can't tell our listeners.
I couldn't without sitting down and looking at our fully costed budget submission. I mean, I made several contributions to it, but to get you absolute chapter and verse, I'd need to have the document in front of you. I know that you don't like if somebody's talking through their hat, Damien. So I won't talk through my hat.
That's fine.
But I'll come back with the documentation.
4.5 minutes gone. You say in your party manifesto you want to ensure and secure inexpensive broadband services is available in all parts of the country. Again, how are you going to pay for broadband for everybody in the country?
Well, broadband is locked in. Unfortunately, the national broadband plan is being rolled out.
And it has to be paid for.
One of our big problems with that is the public ownership at the end. So we're going to pay all of this money. It was a cost of that $6 billion, I think, by the government. And all of this money, and at the end of it, we're not going to own the network. And I think that's incorrect. I think if the government is making that level of investment, then it needs to end up in public ownership.
So
it has to be a public
You would
utility.
look at changing the legislation to basically take this back off air or whoever is building the network.
I'm not sure if that horse is bolted, Damien. And again, to give you chapter and verse, I'd have to sit down with the documentation.
Okay.
But I think it's a bad deal if you come away from that level of spend and don't own the asset at the end of it.
You also say in your manifestos the Green Party would introduce legislation to facilitate the conversion of private business into worker-owned cooperatives. There would be business people dubious about this. This is what you're saying, that you want to convert private businesses into worker-owned cooperatives.
Well, if people are looking for that, if that's that, we're not talking about forced socialism in that kind of way, but we're looking at a cooperative model. So let's say what are still called the cooperatives now, the big dairies, they were originally set up to guarantee a base price for the producer. We have some excellent models around community supported agriculture, which we've been looking at. There's a very successful one in Clare, and it's about working in such a way that you're guaranteeing a base price and a base working rate and basic working conditions. But we're not talking about the forced nationalisation of every industry.
Texter, you want to penalise ordinary people, small farmers, small fishermen. You oppose tackling the huge corporations creating the bulk of carbon emissions.
I absolutely do not. I believe that large corporations absolutely should pay their way. The idea that those Apple millions are resting in an account while our government is fighting to give it back to Apple offends me in a personal sense. And also, I think Green Party policies will be good for small. Well, they will be good for small fishermen. They'll be good for small farmers. I think our current farming policy is only favouring large dairy farmers. We know that for a fact that down in Kerry, 60% of the small family farms down in Kerry have no succession. There's nobody to take the farm on. Current farming policy has been extremely bad for small farmers and small beef and sheep farmers in particular.
7.5 minutes gone nearly. Livestock emissions are completely different than fossil fuel emissions, says Dr. Frank Mittluner, a leading global expert in air pollution. In an interview with Agriland, Ireland's largest selling magazine on Ireland's carbon footprint. The allegation that you're overstating this idea of methane coming from cattle, and that the farming community are basically fighting back against this pressure that they are under from ye.
They're not under any pressure from us. So that's incorrect. What current farming policy is the farming policy that has been
What about this
methane?
What about methane? I've given you the document.
You've given me the document to short notice, and now I've had a look at it. I haven't heard of this man before. I'm having a look at the credentials. The University of California in the city of Davis is not an institution that I know of. However, on his basic point, so he's saying that methane takes 10 years to break down within the atmosphere. That's correct. During that 10-year cycle, however, it has times 40 the implication in terms of trapping greenhouse gas. And then when methane breaks down in the atmosphere, it breaks down to carbon dioxide. So this is a selective viewing of the facts. It does untold damage in the 10-year time frame it exists in the atmosphere, and then when it degrades in the atmosphere, it becomes carbon dioxide.
But there may be something in what he's saying in terms of investigating it further. We're not sure yet.
No, we know for a fact that methane emissions have a huge impact.
So do you want to reduce the national herd?
We do want to reduce the national herd.
By how much?
We are hugely overstocked.
By how much?
Can't give you an exact figure on that, but what I can say is that
dairy farmers listening to this.
That's my brother-in-law, for example, who's a dairy farmer in Wexford. Well, he may or may not be listening to WLR. But the increased intensification in agriculture has been bad for Irish agriculture. And something that we're doing, which we should not do. I've lived in Italy, I've lived in Germany, and I've seen beef products on shelves there, and they are not selling the same product. Irish beef should not sit beside Italian beef or German beef and be priced in the same way. We produce the best beef in the world, and we should concentrate on less and better price. So and that's how it works for a small farmer. If a small farmer can be well paid for the livestock he cares for, and care for is the right word in terms of Irish agriculture. My brother-in-law, my father-in-law, they're dairy farmers. By God, they care for those cattle.
Yeah, I know, but you're talking about decreasing the national herd then. Are you talking about, what are you going to do? Are you going to compensate farmers? Or are you just going to basically not have as many cows?
The increased intensification hasn't worked for an awful lot of dairy farmers. And we've run up against...
It's worked for Glanbia.
It's worked for Glanbia for sure. It has worked for producers, for those middlemen for sure. However...
Dairy farmers are quite doing
Dairy farmers are doing okay, but my brother-in-law runs an extremely well-run dairy farm, and there is one main income there, They're milking an awful lot of cattle. There's been an awful lot of sunk costs in terms of increasing their dairy. And one thing that we've seen time and again since the intensification is we've run into fodder crisis. When there's any sort of problem in the supply of silage, if we have a silage cutting problem, the snow that we had going back a year or 2 years ago, that we're running up against the fodder crisis.
Okay. Minute and a half left. Pensions. What are you going to do about pensions? Would you keep it at 65 years of age?
I'm travelling to Dublin tomorrow to the SIPTU conference.
How are you travelling?
I'm travelling by train, actually.
What are you going to do with pensions?
I'm travelling so that I can sit and work on the train. We think we need to press the pause button on it. I've been talking to lots of people on the doors about it. And what is happening is when we have that 2-year gap, if there's an enforced retirement age of 65 and people aren't getting their state pension till 67, what happens is they start digging into their lump sum. Now, to take my parents as an example, they've set that money aside against late old age because they know in late old age there will be costs. There'll be health costs. And so they took that lump sum and they've put it someplace they can't touch it. Now, if there's a 2-year gap, an income gap between somebody's retirement and they're getting their pension, they're going to dig into that. Their cushion is going to be gone. And that, in fact, it's bad economics and it's bad budgeting, because what will happen is those people will become more reliant on the state in later middle age. You'll have increased morbidity, things like that. We have to press the pause button on that pension age increase. We have to get everybody back to the table and we have to work it through properly.
10 seconds. You going to get elected?
I'm going to have a long count. I hope to be in the hunt. It's 100% up to the people of Waterford to give me the vote number 1 if they want me in the Dáil.
Marc O Cathasaigh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Damien.
Now, a number of texts and comments coming in. Bernadette Philips is here in studio. Good morning, Bernadette.
Good morning, Damien. Lovely to be with you.
And lovely to have you in with us. I'll talk to you in a second. I'll read out some of the comments first. Damien, same old waffle. Damien, how are farmers going to make a living if we go green? Again, Marc O Cathasaigh would say that they are on the side of the farmers. Damien bought a new diesel car in 2008 on the recommendation of the Green Party. Now they're saying, don't buy diesel. Sally has texted to say, Damien, you keep focusing on the next 5 years. I'm looking at my grandchildren's future the next 50 years. Plus, unless we support the Greens and stand for and make far-reaching changes, the future looks very bleak for them. Damien, if they want to reduce herds, give small farmers more for his beef. No point giving him more when only 2 cattle due to reduced herds. Mark might be better listening to others and getting out there and listening to other people. Damien, people are poo-pooing the green agenda, but people need to get real. There is a climate agenda. The Greens are doing fantastic work, says another texter, and other people talking about the Greens in other cities and other countries in the world. Keep your texts and comments coming in. Any texts and comments for Bernadette Philips, independent candidate, please text us 083 333 975, and also you can call 051 846 123. Now, Bernadette, we're going to do the same thing. Going to do 12 minutes with you. So what I'll do is I'll run my little stopwatch here because we want to be fair to everybody, and we'll give you enough time to answer your questions. And I suppose I'll ask you first. Tell me, why should people vote for Bernadette Philips? You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why should people vote for you?
Yeah, I suppose I'm around a long time, and I've been actually seeing the realities of what's been happening. People on the ground, travelling the highways and byways through worked across education, community and business, listening to the stories of people and the realities, and I'd say in the last decade experiencing that myself as well. So really, I suppose, looking at the whole sense of injustices, inequalities, but that's been happening long before even the recession, and I was seeing that in communities. So I keep my feet on the ground and I look at the realities of what's happening. So that's really, really key and central to my campaign.
What is your central tenet of your campaign? Is it the hospital?
Very much so, from the point of view of 24/7 cardiac care for the South East. We've been marching, we've been campaigning for this for years. It is an absolute gross inequality and injustice. And in the reality, at 5 o'clock every evening and every weekend, you just think about the absolute nonsense of it. I stood at the door of the cath lab on the last weekend and it was closed, and And, that really focuses your mind to say that if I had a heart attack standing there, I was within a few steps inside a door where there was perfectly good equipment that could have dealt with my issue, and I couldn't access it, So, I mean, you bring it down to reality and the absolute nonsense of it.
What would you do if people vote for you? Why would a vote for you make any difference?
Well, I suppose the census is calling it out, and we know we've marched, we've campaigned, we've gone as far as we can in respect of, and this is, when I was asked to run, I must say, by Willie Doyle, Mary Coughlin of the 24/7 cardiac cover for the South East, who really have led the way in this campaign from the beginning. I'll be calling it out as wherever it needs, and we know that we haven't been having a response from Irish government in respect of this, and they've fobbed us off with reviews, and now there's a bit of a fob with 8 to 8 and all of this, and we hear about the second cath lab, but I'm saying...
And the government says it is coming, it will come.
Yes, but 8 to 8 is not what we're looking for. It has to be 24/7 cardiac care and nothing else. So this is a human rights issue, and if we have to go further afield, if we have to take these things to Europe, if we have to really put the spotlight on this wherever it needs to go, well, I'm certainly prepared to do that.
Are you a single issue campaigner? I'm
not, and because I think it's very important. I mean, the 24/7 one is crucial because we all have a heart, and that applies to everybody. Whatever party or none you belong to, you've got a heart there that's beating 24/7, which again, of course, I would say makes perfect sense. We don't do business hours with our hearts. But there's loads of other issues, and of course, because my own background, I'm a social scientist, sociologist, I've been looking on the ground for years of the issues that are there. Of course, there's massive health issues. We hear the hospital issues, which is very important. I've been speaking for a number of years to GPs around the country, the crisis that they're facing, the lack of mental health services, and these issues are around for a very long time, can I say. We need to look at hospital charges, parking charges, which is one of mine, because it's an absolute outrage that people have to pay, and particularly in a very vulnerable situation.
What would you do? Would you get rid of hospital charges? I
certainly look very much a restructuring sense of it, and I think it needs to be really taken back looked at.
What would you do if you were a TD? What would you do with the charges at parking at hospitals?
I'd be looking at first of all the very, very vulnerable situation people. I mean, okay, you take. I'm speaking to cancer patients. Somebody was saying to me it costs them about €63 a week for parking, and that has to stop.
Get rid of parking charges.
In the main, yes. I think we have to really look at it again, and also, of course, to see where that goes. I mean,
1.2 million we figure University Hospital Waterford got in the parking charges. Yeah. So where would you make up the shortfall?
Well, that again, I suppose, is something that really has to be actually looked at. And again, it's an awful indictment, isn't it, that we'd be thinking that we have to charge vulnerable people for parking if we're to fund our hospitals. So I would be certainly taking it back in respect of saying where money comes from government in funding our hospitals adequately.
Why should somebody in Dungarvan or West Waterford vote for Bernadette Philips when you're just focusing on one particular, I suppose, main item in the east of the county?
Well, I'm not, you see, and I mean that's really, really important as well, because I mean people's issues in rural areas concern me greatly, and having been to the highways and byways and out in communities and hearing the real issues for people in rural areas. I mean, older people, obviously, Damien, I belong to the Waterford Older People's Council, so I listen to what has been happening people on the ground there. Social isolation, as loneliness is huge, but also closure of post offices and Garda stations and key issues like that have really been impacting on people, and I really want to call those things out, because these things are imposed on people, and this is absolutely wrong.
What would you look at doing? Maybe reversing it?
I would, yeah, absolutely. I think people need access to their local services. I think it's absolutely crucial, and a post office is not just a service, it's a social interaction, and this is what people are telling me on the ground. Somebody mightn't come out of their house all during the week, week, but they might go down and collect a pension, for example, and they might have a chat with somebody over a counter, or they might meet somebody on the street. And that's all been taken away from people. And also the sense of independence has been taken away from people in rural areas as well. We need to look at rural transport again. I know we're looking at the transport links, which is something now that's coming on board, which is a very important one. But I mean, there's so many other issues. The disability services, I lectured in disability studies at university, and I know the issues that are out there. You know, we need to be prioritising children, for example, with serious conditions. We're watching these waiting lists. We're hearing these awful stories of cancellations of operations and things like that. This kind of thing has to stop. And overall rights and services for adults with children and adults with disabilities. If we look at that in respect of employment issues, a huge percentage of people with disabilities are not engaged in employment.
You mentioned, with 7 minutes gone already, 5 minutes left. Amazing how the time flies. You mentioned earlier pensions. Would you look at keeping the pension age at 65?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I suppose it's looking at Age Action, and I run along with what they're saying. And I think, first of all, we need to appoint a senior minister for older people to suspend any of the planned increase, to really have a look at it. And, you know, we need to be looking at a commissioner for ageing and all the statutory powers that go with that. We need an absolute mandate in respect of that. And I suppose it's interesting, you know, to say to people, because, see, this pension issue has come up now as an election issue, which is quite annoying, but people like me as an old researcher would find where the review of the state pension contributory was happening in 2017, which was happening by a joint committee on social protection, and they were looking at key issues and they were calling this out then. So, you know, you'll hear your parties now saying, oh gosh, yes, we think this is awful and we'll have to reverse things. But actually, what were they doing for the last 3 years when we have this joint committee giving them recommendations and conclusions, and, you know, suggesting that that we needed to be looking, for example, the introduction of caring credits to be examined to ensure that people don't suffer a loss in pension entitlement. We also need to be looking at the historic inequities that have existed around, for example, the marriage bar for women. So there's lots of issues that come through the pension issue.
Were you involved in politics before?
I wasn't from the point of view of running like this. My father was involved in politics at different levels. So I grew up around politics. So I always had an ear to the ground of what was happening. But for me, the key things are the social injustices and the inequalities and how we address those.
And why independent? Why didn't you look at joining a party?
I don't think I could ever maintain a party whip, Damien, to be honest with you, you know. And if I was told to vote a certain way, I don't think I could do that. I think having that sense of independence and voting the way that I believe, rather than being how I'm told to vote.
But if you are a TD, you would have to obviously align yourself if you were going to support a government in one particular way. Would you have any preference at this stage? Would you be looking at telling people that are voting for you to vote number 2 for any particular candidate?
Absolutely no. I'm not endorsing anybody at this stage. I'm saying vote number 1, Bernadette Philips. My slogan is let's make change happen. And I think that we can work together with people. It's all about people at the end of the day. And you know something, to really bring back humanity to politics again, you know, because people are not statistics on spreadsheets. People are people with real lives, with loved ones. And this is where our 24/7 cardiac care comes in, and all of the other issues, all of the other social issues. When I was travelling through the highways and byways in what was called the boom years in Ireland, I was meeting people on the margins, people who never, ever experienced Celtic Tiger. And they had then, on top of it, imposed austerity. And so all of those issues need to be called out. We need to be working together.
The other political parties would say, hold on now, you're going a bit too far. We are human people as well. They do care for people as well.
Well, I mean, in fairness, and I'm not actually saying that. What I'm doing is bringing a highlight to the realities on the ground. Look, at homelessness didn't happen by chance. The housing crisis didn't happen by chance. The hospital issues didn't happen by chance. GPs facing, you know, absolute meltdown in different areas didn't happen by chance. They happened by social policy. I suppose I'm a social policy analyst from my my own training, I've looked at how policy is formed, how it's socially constructed, and really I haven't seen people at the centre of it, and we need to put people back in the centre.
Would you find it difficult to get away from this idea that you are a single issue candidate? A number of people saying they believe you're very passionate, they're saying you're a lady, they're saying you're very strong, but again, this single issue thing they believe might not be that good.
Well, no, and I mean, I would say to people loud and clear out there, I am not a single issue candidate. I am a people's candidate. The issues that emerge, we know the issues here in Waterford. The university is another one. We need to be really, really focusing our minds on that, because we need good research and development unit, which I've worked in universities, know how important that is. That reflects itself in good paying jobs. I can talk right across the board about all of those issues. I've lived through them. I've experienced them. I'm in my 60s now, so you learn a lot as you travel. So I'm calling out health, disability services, housing and homelessness, older people services, business too, because I'm very, very focused on business and social enterprise and all of those things. And we mentioned farmers and fisheries, and we haven't had time to go into it, but I'm aware of what's happening, the decimation of our fisheries and also of our farmers, education, environment.
And we will have that, because we're going to do a series of election debates over the next 2 weeks as well, so we'll have time to discuss those matters.
Fantastic.
Bernadette Philips, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You're standing as an independent candidate in the forthcoming general election. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Damien.
Now, welcome back to the programme. Text coming in 083 333 975. Damien, I thought Marc O Cathasaigh was very clear and intelligent. Obviously a man who's in politics for the good of society, locally and nationally. Well done, Bernadette. Best of luck. You're a pure lady. Love you to bits, from Tony from Candles in the Dark. Damien, you should ask all the candidates about climate change and biodiversity. Unless something happens regarding these matters, nothing else matters in the long term. All the parties know this, yet you're just focusing on local issues. Damien, Bernadette and others, single issue candidates sometimes might be difficult to extend into other issues. And there's text in from somebody. Other people saying that Marc and the Greens make great sense. Other people saying that they won't be voting for the Greens because they haven't heard enough details regarding their policies. A WhatsApp message, well done to Bernadette. Other people saying about the Greens as well. We're going to continue our political debates tomorrow. We're going to be in Dungarvan tomorrow. We're going to be talking to Damien Geoghegan and to Mary Butler, and then we will have a number of big debates on later in the campaign, where we will have all the candidates in at different stages. We'll pre-record those at particular locations. Next up, we're going to be talking about the marketing of Waterford City and County, and also the whole issue of business awards, and much more besides.